Hello, Canucks fans, and welcome back to another episode of Canucks Conversation, brought to you as always by the 2024 Toyota BZ4X. The BZ4X is Toyota's brand new all-electric SUV that is designed to go the distance for you and your family. The BZ4X is packed with Toyota's coolest tech, but it still has that trusty SUV feel you know and love. And even though it's electric, it's capable of effortlessly conquering any terrain, whether it's rain, snow, mud, or an overtime loss to a team that's not even going to exist next year. The BZ4X will get you through it all. My name is Dave Woodrelli. I am joined by Harmon Dial. Our technical producer is Grady Sass. We're going to be joined by Bagged Milk of Oilers Nation. You know him. You love him. Our fan base over here in Vancouver, Canucks Convo listeners, have heard Bagged Milk before. He will join us at around 2:15, 2:20 to kind of preview now this big game on Saturday, because Harm, after the overtime loss last night, this game against the Oilers, it takes on a pretty big life of its own.
Yeah, and I mean, first of all, from an Edmonton perspective, who would have thought that just looking at their schedule that they would have made this interesting from their perspective? I mean, without Connor McDavid to dunk on the Golden Knights 5-1, and of course, last weekend as well on a back-to-back set, first against Colorado and then Calgary winning both of those games as well. They've taken a difficult schedule and still found a way to continue rolling. As for the Canucks in that Arizona game, I remember yesterday's show mentioning that there was some trap game risk because Arizona is the type of team that fits that sweet spot where they're not good, but they're competitive and they're not going to it's hard for a team like San Jose, Anaheim, or a Chicago to truly be a trap game opponent because they're just not good enough to even be competitive on enough nights. But when you get to Arizona and they have some young talent, as we saw last night, plus you have sort of the sigh of relief and the little bit of exhale that, okay, we're 5 points up now. We're coming off great vibes from beating Vegas. We're this close to the playoffs. It did feel like that was a risk, and you could tell the difference, right? Because through the first two periods, the Canucks played well, but it wasn't until they were down 2 in the third period after all those penalties that they entered desperation mode, had that next level of urgency, and then they just dominated all over the ice, and that's when you saw them realize that, oh, we at least got to bank something from this game.
2.5-minute shifts for Quinn Hughes were becoming pretty regular, and I saw someone on Twitter say, now we're seeing what it's going to be like in the playoffs when the Canucks are, if they're chasing a game, Quinn Hughes is playing as much as possible. But again, he really put that third goal on himself, and he did. He bobbled the puck behind the net, and it resulted in that third Arizona goal, which obviously ended up being the difference. But I think when you tally 3 points on the night, I appreciate what Quinn's trying to do by saying, yeah, it's on me, it's on me. Yeah, that game is not on Quinn Hughes by any means, but sure, maybe that goal is the doing of Quinn Hughes. But man, he's been so good. He was so good again last night. No real surprise there. I want to talk about Archer Shelovs. I gotta remember that. I want to talk about him a little bit because I liked his game. That second goal, I saw everybody saying oh, it went through 5 bodies and he didn't really have much of a shot, and that's all fine. That's very true, but I really would have liked to see just a little more, I guess, awareness of where the puck is. Because yes, you can't see it, and I know he's upright because that's how the goalies are. Ian Clark trained goalies are, but you gotta have some idea when the shot's taken, because when the shot's taken, you don't stay upright. You move, right? You move around, and I get it was a hard shot to deal with, but I'm not totally absolving Shelovs because I know, yeah, he couldn't see it. I get it, but look, those shots happen a lot. You got to be able to adapt, right? And if you're in the right positioning, you make that save even if you can't see it. So I'm not trying to pin the loss on Shelovs. I thought he made some key saves. He made the key stop that really resulted in this game even going to overtime. So I don't think he was bad by any means. It was just another one of these games, Harm, where you say, man, it's going to be nice when Thatcher Demko's back.
Yeah, and I think you have to sort of separate that. You look at Shelovs, and this is a young goaltender who's coming up from the AHL. With that context in mind, you're like, okay, it was fine, right? A young guy like that is going to make mistakes. But let's be very clear. The Arizona Coyotes in that game had better goaltending than the Canucks did. And I mean, even on the first goal, To me, that's a bad rebound to give, like right to Josh Brown. I didn't love that. And without Thatcher Demko, it feels like, as you were sort of alluding to on that second goal, yeah, there have been heavy screens and a lot of traffic to deal with, but the Canucks have allowed a lot of floaters from the point since Demko went down pretty consistently. And that's just the type of thing that when you have a top goaltender, even when he has screens, traffic to contend with, that you're not going to allow those types of goals. And again, that's why if it wasn't for the risk of, hey, they might lose the division, I honestly would not have cared about this loss at all, because it's game 79 of the season. And you had a AHL goaltender in net, essentially. Plus, you look at the numbers, high danger chances were 14-5 at 5-on-5. I think if anything, the Canucks were carrying play for most of the night. And yeah, they made a couple mistakes here and there, but it's not as if they completely fell asleep at the wheel. One of the other things you realize when you look at other top teams around the NHL is that they also lose to teams at the bottom of the standings, especially as you get sort of closer to the playoffs and there's not sort of as much left to play for once you're sort of clinched. But because you have this added wrinkle of, oh, they might lose the division to Edmonton now, that's why it feels like there's more disappointment that they couldn't pick up. The way, and I'll say this from an offensive perspective, it was like, for all the great looks that they had, it didn't feel like they got enough pucks actually on net. It didn't feel like they tested Ingram and forced him to make enough difficult saves. A lot of shots, especially through the first two periods, it felt like were blocked. We're missing the net. Zadorov, of course, hit the post. So I think that's, especially through the first two periods, was probably a big reason why they lost this game, was they weren't able to convert all the great looks that they had into actual chances on net.
You mentioned it. This game on Saturday has a lot of meaning now. And like I said, we're going to be joined by Bagged Milk, the managing editor over at Oilers Nation. We're going to talk to him very shortly, but just keeping it on this game a bit, Harm. That's why the 1 point really, really mattered, right? Like, even getting to overtime was massive, because right now the Oilers are 4 points back of the Canucks for the top of the division, and they have 2 games in hand. One of which will be played tomorrow against those same Arizona Coyotes, and then Saturday against the Canucks. So again, the Oilers will be coming off the second leg of a back-to-back, but hell, Arizona was off the second leg of a back-to-back last night as well. So we will see what happens. And again, Thatcher Demko did practice today. So we will see what comes of that. The Canucks did have a practice today. So we'll see what ends up happening. Saturday is going to have a lot of interesting storylines heading into it, but none greater than the battle for the top of the Pacific. And Harm, you and I were texting during last night's game, and the thing I said to you was, I gotta stop coming on the show and declaring that the race for the top of the Pacific is over, because I think I've done it like 2 or 3 times now. And yesterday I did it again. I was like, oh yeah, the Oilers aren't. Yeah, it's too much now. It's too much. The Canucks won that game against Vegas. They're treading in the right direction. And I'll be honest, I kind of penciled in last night as a win, not an overtime loss, but I have to stop declaring that it's over. It's not over until it's over, is what I'm going to start saying now. That's what I'm keeping in mind when we head into this game on Saturday. A couple comments here on the topic of Archer Shelovs. It's Jacoby says, it's excited for Demko to come back. Shelovs has been a fun story, but since Demko went down in 13 games, the Canucks have only had a save percentage above 900 5 times. They win at least 3 more in this stretch with number 35 in net. Top G said, bottom line, with Demko, we win the game. And I think that's a very, very good way of putting it. Not a ton of shots, some high quality ones on Archer Shelovs. But again, he made some saves. He did. He was fine. Maybe better than Casey DeSmith, but you're quickly realizing nobody's really going to replace Thatcher Demko. So we will see when Demko's able to return. If that is Saturday, that would be a nice little jolt for the Canucks. And again, Harm, I've been saying it for months, and I have to say it again. I really hope Thatcher Demko can get at least 3 starts before the playoffs. And the Canucks are, they're running out of time a little bit here. So we'll see if Demko's ready to return on Saturday, but he did practice today.
Yeah, and one of the other things from that game that I wanted to highlight, one of the biggest positives, is I thought that was one of Elias Lindholm's best games as a Vancouver Canuck. How noticeable he was right from the first period. He was so ferocious on the puck. I remember him keeping a couple of plays alive in the offensive zone. I remember the first period, he had a great play coming in the defensive zone, made a sweet little stick check, created a clean zone exit, was actually driving play in that sense, was terrific, of course, on the penalty kill, which against Arizona is nothing to sneeze at because Arizona has the 12th best power play in the league, last I checked. So it's not as if they have some ineffective man advantage that can't get anything done. We see that they have some young talent with Keller, with Cooley, who, by the way, has been way better than when I saw him in the first half of the season. The last couple of games against the Canucks, he's looked consistently dangerous. But anyway, with Lindholm, immediate impact on the PK as well. And the 2-on-1 chance he had with Joshua in the third period was a terrific look as well. Him getting 3 shots on net. I remember when I spoke to Lindholm in Vegas, when he came to his offensive game, the biggest thing that he kept coming back to was, I just need to start with getting shots on net. And from that perspective, in your first game back, to get 3 on top of how effective he was away from the puck, defensively disruptive on both ends of the ice, I thought it was a terrific return game for him.
He created the Filip Hronek breakaway chance too, if memory serves.
Yeah,
and Filip Hronek had the penalty shot, and I just wanted to get it in. I absolutely loved that everybody was like laughing on the bench, and they were giving Hronek these pointers on what they wanted to see him do. And I swear I tweeted this out, but I swear he said to Petey, he said, "Okay, I'll try it." Like that when I was trying to read his lips, I read, "I'll try it," and then he walked in, did his little fake slapper, and I don't know if that's what Petey had drawn up for him, but it was an interesting little sequence there. Anything else on the game that you wanted to get to, or do you want to save it for anyone else, and we'll get to Bagged Milk now?
We can save the rest of it for anyone else.
Fantastic. All right, let's bring him in. Bagged Milk is brought to you by, you guessed it, the Canucks Army playoff shirt. I had to do it to him. Bagged Milk is brought to you by the Canucks Army playoff shirt, which is available now at nationgear.ca. The playoffs are near, and we have an army. Nation Gear is ready to gear you up for Vancouver's playoff run. Rep your favorite team as they battle for the cup. Shop the exclusive We Have an Army playoff tee and more at nationgear.ca. Okay, let's bring him in. Bagged Milk. I also don't know how we're doing this. So for those that don't know the bit, Bagged Milk doesn't show his face. Nobody knows. I don't even know what Bagged Milk looks like. I still don't know his real name. Perfect. Okay, we've got him there. Are you in your Alfa Romeo, Bagged Milk?
Nope, I am driving around in a fine automobile from Pacific Toyota dealers here, Quads. I'm just going on a little test drive, as you can see, although half of me is cut off, so I will be swapping that photo in for something more centralized.
Fantastic. Thanks so much for joining us. We appreciate it. So take me through the Oilers season to this point. We know they fired Jay Woodcroft. We know they were a much lesser team the last time these two teams faced, which was a long time ago, but we can see by their record that something has changed.
Yeah, I mean, it's been a wild year. Everybody knows how bad the Oilers were to start off the season. Like, if you think about it, Quads, on U.S. Thanksgiving, which, you know, is kind of like an unofficial line in the sand that people kind of be like, oh, well, if you're not in a playoff spot by this period, then you're basically screwed for the rest of the year. So at that time, the Oilers were 30th place in the NHL. They had a 5-12-1 record. At the time, by the way, just in case you're wondering, the Vancouver Canucks were 21 points ahead of the Edmonton Oilers. But since then, since that date, they've gone 43-12-4. They have just been an absolute gas of a team since Chris Knobloch joined. Are they perfect? No. Do they annoy me? Yes. Do they make me mad? Yes. Do I throw things in my house? Of course. But they're playing some good hockey, and most notably, they're playing some simpler hockey because they just aren't trying to get too cute with the puck all the time, and it's paying huge dividends. And obviously, Stuart Skinner not being an .850 goalie has had a huge part of that comeback over the back half, or I guess back 60% of the season. So to answer the question, it's been a ride, up and down, ebbs and flows. There's been no real steady flow for the Oilers until Chris Knobloch came in. So it's almost like a tale of two seasons. There's like the Woodcroft era to start it off, and then what Nobby's done since.
Besides goaltending, what's the biggest X factor for the Oilers in the playoffs? Maybe the biggest concern you have outside of the goaltending, because a lot of people believe that Edmonton is one of the, favorite cup contenders, especially before the season, but others have always looked at them and said, beyond McDavid and Draisaitl, we don't have a lot of confidence that they can actually get it done and win a Stanley Cup.
To me, the big thing is like what we saw last year. If you're thinking about the second round last year when the Oilers got bumped out to Vegas, it was the secondary scoring that let them down, Harmon. It was, Nugent Hopkins, Hyman, Kane, they all had pretty good years in terms of scoring last year, but in the playoffs, that dried up. So to me, the biggest concern I have is secondary scoring. We know Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl are going to do what they do. They're good at it. Pretty sure they're going to be fine. But throughout the lineup, we got to make sure that we're getting some goals from everybody else, because you can't just win in the playoffs depending on two players. Now, I think the Oilers are a deeper team up front than they were last year, so that should help. But that doesn't necessarily mean results are coming in the postseason. So to answer your question, secondary scoring is probably my biggest concern. They need goals from throughout the lineup, and last year they just did not get it. So until I see it, that's what I'm going to be thinking about.
On that note, how's Corey Perry fit in Edmonton?
It is so weird to me, Quads, how much I love watching Corey Perry be annoying for the Edmonton Oilers. For almost 2 decades, I've hated him. I've loathed Corey Perry. I've despised him because everything he does is so annoying and frustrating on the ice that you kind of forget how fun it could be if he's doing that for your team. And while I know we're not talking about the guy who won the Hart Trophy, he's not the guy that won 50 goals or scored 50 goals a bunch of years ago, he's still annoying. And the processor is still there. So how he's fit in is he's chipping in with goals. He's chipping in at timely periods when they need something. And he's just doing all of the things that make him Corey Perry. He's annoying to play against. He's drawing penalties. He's drawing his line mates into the fight with him. He's doing things that Corey Perry has done for 2 decades. And now that he's with the Oilers, it's a whole lot more fun being on this side of the fence. So he's fit in well. He's fit in the depth role. He's playing mostly on the 4th line, sometimes 3rd line. He's moonlit in the top 6 when they've really needed somebody to kind of fill a hole. But Corey Perry, I think, has kind of been doing everything we could have hoped for him. He's being Corey Perry.
More of a big picture question. I have noticed that Evan Bouchard is going to expire as a restricted free agent at the end of next season, which is the same year that Leon Draisaitl expires as a UFA, I believe. Kind of 2-part question here. First, I've been thinking about how Darnell Nurse was bridged and then had one great year and now is on a contract that sort of looks like an anchor. And I'm sort of looking at Bouchard, and he only makes $3.9 million right now and is going to have incredible point totals. First of all, how worried are you about what Bouchard's next contract is going to cost? And second, because it is coming up at the same time as Draisaitl's contract and McDavid's going to be up soon, big picture with the Oilers cap situation, is there extra urgency that you have to win now, knowing that some of your top players are going to become a lot more expensive here in the next couple of years?
I think so. I mean, but I think when you're with the Edmonton Oilers and you're this far along in Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl's career, there's urgency to win every year. And to your point about the cap, yeah. I mean, you look at a guy like Darnell Nurse, and if he was making $6 million, I don't know that people would be as hard on him as they are at 9.25. But the reality is he makes too much money. So it is what it is. But in terms of saving cap dollars for what needs to happen, we're talking Draisaitl, we're talking McDavid, we're talking Evan Bouchard. There's going to be guys that have to go. And that's just the reality. Like a guy like Evander Kane, $5.5 million. Is he going to be, or $5.125 million? Is he going to be around? No. I could see him getting traded this offseason to kind of clear up some space. A guy like Brett Kulak at $275. I like him a lot as a player, but can you get a cheaper 3rd pairing defenseman? The answer is yes. So they're going to have to kind of make some interesting decisions. They're going to have to hope some of their prospects, which I admit the prospect pool is a little light, can step up and may be impactful. But they're going to have to do this tap dance, and there's going to be some difficult decisions made with this roster going forward, because even the first 2 you mentioned, Harmon, if you want to keep Leon and Connor, they're both getting raises from the 8.5 and the 12.5 that they're both at. So they're going to have to navigate that. And then with Bouchard, he's at 3.9 for another year. So you're going to cash in on all the points he's going to put up at 3.9. But then what happens? Is he 10 or 11 at that point? Can you get him at 9 because he's still restricted? I have no idea. But watching the Oilers cap dance over the next couple of seasons is going to be fascinating. And for whoever the next GM is, because mind you, Ken Holland's in the last year of his deal. He's peacing out. He's going to be joining you guys somewhere in BC, enjoying the sunshine. It's going to be a tall order for whoever steps into those in his shoes.
Jim Benning. Jim Benning's available, I hear. Okay,
Yeah,
couple
Peter
questions
Chiarelli
for
is
you.
too. Might as well bring him back for a second tour of duty. Why not?
Hey, they won a cup together. Bring those two together. You're unstoppable. Okay, couple questions here. The first one being Connor McDavid. We're expecting that's just maintenance yesterday. Like, what's the deal with him? I saw Zach Hyman scored without McDavid or his dad on the ice.
Well, first of all, I want to thank Zach Hyman's parents for blessing us with this beautiful season of his. That's very important that we need to mention with every goal he scores. 53 last night, and they have to write a check every single time he scores. I find that bizarre, but like now with e-transfers and Venmo, there's a better way of doing this. Writing the manual checks doesn't make sense to me. Back to Connor though. He got banged up a little bit on Saturday night against the Flames. It was towards the end of the third period, which makes it especially annoying. But it was one of those situations where Chris Knobloch spoke this morning after practice, and he said, listen, if this is a game that meant anything, like talking about last night against Vegas, that is, if this meant anything, like if the playoffs were on the line, if they were going to clinch, something like that, he would have played. So how bad is it? Probably the answer is not bad, but for what's coming up on Saturday, boys, I wouldn't be surprised at all if the Oilers kind of park him through this weekend. Like they locked in home ice last night for the first round. Their playoff spot is already set. Yes, you want him to get to 100 assists. He needs one more. If he sits out the weekend, they still got 3 games after that. So I hope they're patient with him. And as much as it would be fun to catch Vancouver and wipe out that 21-point deficit from the American Thanksgiving, I don't know how much it matters. At least to me, it's one of those things where I think Connor's ultimately going to dictate whether or not he plays. I would not be surprised at all if he sits tomorrow night against Arizona. I could see him being back in against Vancouver on Saturday, especially with the way, like, let's be honest, Vancouver stomped the Oilers all 3 games earlier in the season. Maybe there's some kind of chip on the shoulder for McDavid in a game like that. Who knows? But I wouldn't be offended if he just sits through the weekend and they just kind of play it extra cautious with him.
We're building this up to be a huge matchup, but what are you expecting to see in Canucks versus Oilers on Saturday?
I think we're going to see a really good game. Like, again, back earlier in the season, the Canucks walked through the Oilers, all 3 games they played. And what's going to be interesting to see is how game 4 goes, because we talked about it earlier. That was not the Oilers team that is playing today. The Canucks wiped the floor with them because they were better in every zone. From the crease outward, they were the better team and deserved to win. Is that going to happen again on Saturday? It very well may. But I also think that we're going to get a much tighter game than we got the first 3 versions. Whether or not Connor's playing, the Oilers are playing better. The Canucks could have Demko back. That would obviously be a huge boost for them between the pipes. So I just think that we're in for a really good game between 2 really good teams. And I think it's going to be fast. I think there's going to be goals. And I think there's going to be a lot of cool plays from 2 rosters that have a ton of skill in this.
Is there a team that Oilers fans don't want to face in round 1?
I fear no one, Quads. You know that.
I know you don't.
I don't think that that's kind of the approach. And I would say the same thing for the Canucks, right? Like, if you want to be the best, you have to beat the best teams. So looking at who the most likely options for Edmonton are today, as we're speaking, is probably going to be LA, or it could be Vegas. Do I think the Oilers match up against both of those teams pretty well? I do. I really do. Vegas last night, again, granted, they have a bunch of players hurt right now. I understand that. But they looked awful last night. Aiden Hill couldn't stop anything. And the Oilers just kind of demolished them and held them to 18 shots. So am I worried about Vegas? No. I know all those players are going to be coming back. Like Mark Stone's going to rise from the dead like he's the Undertaker at WrestleMania. But who cares? Fine. He hasn't played in a while. I imagine he's going to be rusty. As for LA, I think the Oilers are already in LA's head. So I don't like their goaltending tandem of Talbot and Riddick. I think both of those guys are I don't understand how that was the plan this year. I mean, I assume they tried other things. Like, certainly there was a plan B and C, but I'm not really too concerned about either of those teams. I think that what you get beyond the first round gets more interesting. But based on the 2 likely opponents right now, I think the Oilers stack up well against both LA and Vegas.
So here we're talking a lot about how we don't want to see the Canucks face LA because they just play that boring trap style of hockey. And obviously Vegas is defending Cup champs. What we're all really hoping for is a round 2 matchup with the Edmonton Oilers. And I know you
Sure.
and I are both hoping for that. That would be so entertaining. That would be so much fun. And hey, you'd have a lot more appearances on Canucks Combo.
I think that the people of Canucks conversation, the ones that are watching the stream right now, they're yearning for it. It burns in their loins. More bag milk appearances. It's been a while since I've been on the show, Quads. That would just be a fun series. Again, going back to even just what I was saying about Saturday's matchup, those two teams, the Canucks and the Oilers, a lot of skill, a lot of guys that can score goals, a lot of guys that can make plays, and I think that would be a really fun second round series, provided that we both get through. And from a more selfish standpoint, it's also good for business, Quads, if both of those teams go through. Like, let's be honest. So I think that there's a lot to like here. I'm hoping, to be honest, all the Canadian teams kind of can go on a run. It's more fun when the Canadian teams are in. We just tend to care a little bit more up here. So I just like them all to get through at least the first round, except Toronto, because we know that's not going to happen anyway. They're fake news, always have been. So I'm looking forward to the first round. Just in general, there's no better time for the NHL than the first round of the playoffs. It's awesome.
Undoubtedly. Bag Milk, thanks so much for joining us. We really appreciate it. We'll have you back on ahead of game one of round 2.
Thanks, boys.
There he is. Bag Milk, you can read his work, although I don't know why you'd want to, unless you're trying to get an Oilers perspective over at OilersNation.com. Really good stuff over at OilersNation.com. Yeah, check him out. Bagged Milk. He's been on the show before. People in the chat love Bagged Milk. Yeah. Harmon, anything that you wanted to say about that conversation?
No, it was awesome. I am just hoping that on Saturday we get a vintage October Stuart Skinner. That would just be the cherry on top to basically clinch the division unofficially if Stuart Skinner just turns into a pumpkin again. It's also been a while since the Canucks have just demolished a top team, you know? I'm not expecting that outcome, but it would be very funny.
It'd be great if Thatcher Demko's first game back, they just demolished the Oilers. And on Stuart Skinner, like we had Kevin Woodley on the show, and he pointed out to us that Stuart Skinner, his numbers were awful at the start of the year. And the Oilers were also the worst team at giving up high danger, like rush chances against. They cleaned that up, and then all of a sudden, Stuart Skinner's good again. So again, I'd love it. I'd love it if we saw the Stuart Skinner of old. But again, I think you're hoping more for the Edmonton defense of old. I was going to ask Bag Milk about Troy Stetcher, but I didn't get around to it. Troy Stetcher hasn't played a lot in Edmonton. Makes me sad. Grady, you got something?
I have a question for you both. Have you ever tried bagged milk? You ever had it?
No.
Do we even have it here?
No,
I thought it was only in like Nova Scotia.
East. Yeah, in Ontario they sell it. I was so weirded out when I first saw that. Just like crunching this big bag of milk. You got to buy these little containers to put it in, and then
you buy like a pitcher that you put like iced tea in, right?
Exactly, right? But if you don't tie it up, it gets really stinky and gross. So I'm grateful for the cartons. Yeah, I don't get it either. I remember there is a reason why, but I can't remember. So anyways.
Wow, the chat pointed out you shaved. I didn't notice that. Did you shave yesterday or today?
Yeah, I shaved last night. Couldn't do it anymore.
Okay.
It was getting too itchy, and then I screwed up trimming. Harm, I don't know if you ever have this problem. Probably not, because your beard's always immaculate. You screw up, you go too far into the hair, and then it's over. I got to shave it all off and restart.
That's actually my worst nightmare.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm way too careful.
Any input on that? No?
I was going to tell you guys I'm growing up my playoff beard. I just started it, you see? I got the start. I'm ready to go.
There you go.
Nice shadow.
Thank you. Jesse C. Grady must be in one of those Gillette commercials with the Raptors. The clean shaven.
Ah, yes. Man, I can't even remember the last time I used an actual blade on my face. Probably in broadcasting school in like 2017.
There you go. Grow your playoff beard now, though.
Yeah.
You grow with
No,
me.
I think we should.
More.
We will. Yeah. Harm doesn't want to partake because his beard's too precious.
No, Harmon has to keep it trimmed. Harmon's got to keep it in check.
He's looking fresh.
I get it. He's looking fresh. Okay.
I don't want to look 13 years old again.
That's fair.
Don't worry. Quads is doing that all for us.
Yeah, I hit our quota. We're good. Okay, I got to tell you about our next sponsor, and that is 4 Winds Brewing. More specifically, it's the Featherweight IPA. If you're looking for a nice hoppy beer, but still want something light and flavorful, then look no further than the 4 Winds Featherweight IPA. At just 4.5%, this incredibly light IPA is packed full of tropical and citrusy goodness. Available now at liquor stores across BC or through the 4 Winds online shop for home delivery anywhere in BC at 4windsbrewing.ca. Look at that can. Beautiful. Locally owned and operated in Delta. Logan Van... This is great. Logan Van Dyke. Quads by the final will look like he has a bit of dirt on his face. And yeah, it's true. Like when I've grown it out before, it ain't pretty. Nobody's going to like it. Nobody's going to like it. Rajcraft says I got the 1 o'clock shadow going on. I think that's a little generous, but I like it. This is great. Just a lot of comments about my facial hair or lack thereof. Quads is going to have the little catfish mustache whiskers going if they go deep, and it's true. Like it grows straight, it doesn't curl, it just goes straight down. So we'll see. We'll see what ends up happening. It'll just be like hanging over my lip.
This is why I love our YouTube chat, because you just never know where the conversation is going to go when something like random as one person shaving. Shout out to the chat.
Karn, Quads is going to be on Catch a Predator just by mistake. Just walk past an elementary school. They'll be like, hey, you can't be here anymore. Okay. With that, as we get to a lot of listener contributions, let's get to our segment where we're actually supposed to do that. And we like to call it Anyone Else, presented by DoorDash. It's our listeners' chance to get involved and hit us up in the YouTube live chat. And it's also our listeners' chance to get 25% off and 0 delivery fees on their first order of $15 or more when they download the DoorDash app and enter code NATION25. That's all capital letters NATION and the numbers 25. Offer valid in Canada. Subjects change. Terms do apply. With Double Dash on DoorDash, you can order from multiple restaurants or stores in the same delivery without additional delivery fees. So everyone can get what they want and need. Promo code is Nation25. This is good. From Jay Halls. Back to the Catch a Predator thing. He'll be the kid on Catch the Predator, not the Predator himself. That's great. Yeah, okay, and a little more, bring it back down to earth. Syndicat, nobody needs to worry about growing a long playoff beard with this Canucks team. How bad can it get in only a week? Harm, last night's game, as we bring it back a bit, really made me think this team is a Thatcher Demko away from being good again. They've cleaned up the power play. Elias Lindholm's impact on the penalty kill was immediately measurable. I liked their 5-on-5 play against Arizona. I'm not pinning it on Artur Silovs. I'm not trying to. But Thatcher Demko is an elite goaltender.
For sure. And just the difference that it has also on sequentially, for instance, against a team like LA, if you run into them in the playoffs, it's also the timing of saves too, right? And how that can change the course of a hockey game where when you have a stout goaltender in it, you can afford to, let's say, start slow in the first 10 minutes and you have confidence that your goaltender is going to be able to bail you out and not immediately put you in a 1-0 deficit, that all of a sudden when you're in a 1-0 deficit against a team like LA, they change the way the game is played with their 1-3-1. And that's something that in the first half of the season, again, I'm really focused on this idea of who scores first and what impact it has on how the rest of the game is played. Just because I remember having a conversation with Dmitry Filipovich, who does the Hockey PDO cast. And as we were discussing the context of the Canucks breakout year and how they were legit, even though their PDO was really inflated, one of the only points that sort of we agreed on that might change things and have a detrimental impact as the Canucks sort of come back down to earth from a PDO perspective is that they're not going to score first every game like it felt like they did up until the All-Star game, and that can sort of change things. And so again, from a goaltending perspective, like that's a small area too, where when you get Demko back, I think you're going to have more confidence that you're not going to allow, in the Vegas game, for example, or the recent LA one too, that you're going to allow 1 or 2 quick goals and now you're all of a sudden in a hole.
This is an interesting question, and I'm sure we'll continue the conversation about this team and what they're looking like heading into Saturday. And hey, we got a show tomorrow too. We'll be back in studio at the Wall Center tomorrow to talk about Saturday's game against the Oilers, because it does have a big game feel. And again, we briefly touched on it with Bagged Milk, but we're gonna have a good guest tomorrow, and we're going to preview that game more tomorrow. But this one, I really like this one. It's a good question to ask. I think it's pretty undeniable what the answer is. Top G, anyone else? What would be the most watched final? I think it would be Vancouver versus Toronto. And he's talking about the States and Canada. As much as we'd like to see the Canucks in the Stanley Cup final. And as much as I'd like to see Quinn Hughes go on Pat McAfee, or Pat McAfee, that's how you say it. As much as I'd like to see that, I would think an Edmonton Toronto final would be the most watched around the world.
Yeah, I think so. Just because of the Connor McDavid effect and the star power that he has. I know Vancouver's a bigger market, but the way the league, I mean, at the end of the day, even with Nathan McKinnon probably winning the Hart Trophy this year, Connor McDavid is the best player in the NHL, and that gives you an edge. And the storylines of McDavid versus Matthews, McDavid especially close to 100 assists, Matthews close to 70 goals, 2 Canadian markets that would probably get the edge over Vancouver versus Toronto in terms of viewership.
Yeah. This is a good one from Conversation. I'll ask it to you, Harm. How much does the score effect of consistently scoring first at the start of the season explain why their expected goals for percentage was lower when they were winning than now when they've been distinctly average?
Maybe a little bit. And that's something that you do think about how many times do we come on the show after a game where, I don't know, they were playing Chicago and they scored 1 or 2 goals quickly. And then for the rest of the game, Chicago was carrying play and had the edge in, let's say, shots and chances at 5-on-5. But we'd come on the show and say it doesn't matter because the Canucks just sort of put it in cruise control. And when you're down a couple goals, it's the bare minimum to be generating looks and creating more than your opposition that's just kind of parking the bus a little bit. And having said that, I don't think it's a massive factor, just because while I don't think the adjustment is perfect, these metrics are score adjusted to try and account for the effect of how long you spend leading in a game versus how long you're trailing in a game. And when I do cite 5-on-5 statistics, it's always score adjusted. So I'm sure it has some impact. I don't think it's the main reason that since Jan 1 onward, for example, that the Canucks are all of a sudden have terrific 5-on-5 metrics, because genuinely when you watch them play, the improvement in their metrics has been from a defensive standpoint for the most part. And especially right up until the All-Star break, or even when the Canucks have been struggling, for the most part, we've been able to agree that defensively, they haven't given up a lot of grade A chances. They've mostly been tight off the rush. And that sort of aligns with their improved 5-on-5 metrics.
Okay, I wanted to... Here, we have a question from Facebook. Let's get to this one, Grady. Okay, this one from Matt Jones, regular listener of the show. What does your ideal top 6 look like next year? Harm, I'm going to come out and say, I don't know who, but the Canucks need to go get someone this offseason. You can't come back with the same top 6 next year.
I agree. You're probably missing a true impact top 6 play driver. I mean, it's way too early to be projecting an ideal top 6. Obviously, you're going to have Pettersson in it. You're going to have Miller in it. Besser's going to be an interesting decision, right? Do you extend him? What's his future looking like? He's probably more likely than not still going to be on this team, given how successful he's been this year and given that this team is in a win now mode. Höglander is going to be there. And then you've got sort of question marks in the sense that while I love how impactful Joshua and Garland have been in the top 6 lately, in an ideal situation, they're probably on your third line, right? And this also goes back to, if you want the depth of a true cup contending team, you want those guys in a third line role, because think about how impactful Stanley Cup winning teams, their third line has been. Tampa, for all those years, had an elite, when they won back-to-back Stanley Cups, an elite third line with Blake Coleman, Barclay Goodrow, Yanni Gord as sort of a shutdown line. And that's the type of impact that Joshua and Garland can have in a third line role. Or you think about Vegas, their quote unquote third line was led by William Karlsson, who is, on most teams would be a high end second line center. You even think about Florida made the Cup final last season, and on their third line, remember that Sam Reinhart was actually playing there as opposed to Barkov, where he is on the first line this year. So it was Reinhart on that line, Luostarinen, Lundell. They were that heartbeat of that Panthers team, forechecking, creating so much offense, providing so much support behind Kachuk and Barkov. Every team, it feels like, has that third line. And as we're projecting an ideal top six, hopefully you can add a couple pieces so that those guys can slide down, assuming, of course, that you're able to find a way to re-sign Joshua in the first place.
This is an interesting question from Karin, and I want to answer it because it's similar to what you were just talking about. He said, given the resurgence of top-heavy teams like the Avalanche and Oilers, is it better to have 2 amazing lines than 4 good lines? I would say no, because when the Avs actually won anything, and hey, maybe they'll go on a cup run this year, and I'll be proven wrong. But when the Avs won the cup, they had like Nazem Kadri on their third line. And you talk about heartbeat of the team. He was such a vital piece of that team. You need those guys in your bottom 6 that are going to be impact players if you want to actually win anything in the playoffs. That's my take on it, is you can have your 2 lines and do really well in the regular season, but if you want to make some noise in the playoffs, you're going to need that secondary scoring to be great. And like Baggedmilk was talking earlier about what went wrong for the Oilers last year. Secondary scoring went away and they couldn't get it done.
Exactly. And now Kadri was centering their second line, but Colorado's third line the year they won the cup, they had Comfer, who on a lot of teams, especially non-playoff ones, he'd be passable as a second line center. But in a third line center role, I mean, that's a luxury given how excellent he is defensively. And on top of that, they had Burakovsky on the wing, who they then lost that offseason. Yeah, their third line, their middle 6 as a whole was way more impactful than last year, for example, where Colorado, in that first round matchup against Seattle, McKinnon, Makar, their top players were excellent, yet 0 bottom 6 goals, right? And that's where Seattle had the edge, where their balanced 4 lines were able to take it to Colorado, no matter how well McKinnon was able to play. So, look, obviously the elite superstar talent at the top lineup matters, but that's one of the reasons, but you also need the depth. And that's one of the reasons why I look at Dallas, and that's why I sort of lean towards them instead of Colorado when I think about that conversation of the best team in the Western Conference.
And Grady making a good point as well. The Seattle Kraken's 4 lines beat the Colorado Avalanche just last year, right? So we have an example of this.
What I said. Did you listen to what I said?
Example of this. Of course I listened. But I want to say Grady mentioned it too. Because he said in our private chat. Anyways, okay, people are asking what the best hockey podcast besides this one. I'm going to say the Vancast.
Nice. Love that. Yeah, go back and just listen to all the takes from last season about how depressing the state of the team is. All those deadline decisions, which is funny, right? Like, think about at last year's deadline. We were talking about, what's going to happen? Are they potentially going to move Besser, Garland? JT Miller's contract extension is going to kick in. He's been playing really poorly. Should they look to get off that contract before his no trade or no move clause kicks in? And they make this surprise Filip Hronek trade. How could they be making this win now move? It's we were wrong about this team last year, and it's just so funny to think about those conversations given where the team is now.
I'm going to give you 2 real ones. Rink Wide for post game, and Sekeres Price before you listen to our show, but Rink Wide post game. We make appearances on Rink Wide. We co-host Rink Wide. Rink Wide's gone live now as of Sekeres Price. But man, yeah, playoffs. I'm excited for what we're putting out there. It's going to be great. Okay, I wanted to close it on anyone else on this harm. We haven't talked about it yet. No one in the chat brought it up either, which kind of surprised me. Noah Hannafin signs an extension with the Vegas Golden Knights for 8 years at, what was it, 7.325? Is that the number?
7.35? Something
7.35. Yep, that's the number. So signs that in Vegas. Left shot defenseman. Harm, I ask you this. How does this impact the Canucks and Filip Hronek?
I'll be honest, that AAV came in a bit lower than I expected it to be. Considering that, of course, we're expecting the cap to go up and just how valuable Hannafin is as a top pair defenseman. Look, if he was signing in Calgary, I would not have blinked twice if the AAV on his deal ended up being $8 million. And so from that perspective, 7.35, that's not bad from a Canucks perspective. I will say, I'm sure Alan Walsh and Hronek's camp will argue that he took a discount in Vegas in some part because of the tax situation. With Vegas, of course, Nevada has no state tax. That plays into things. Overall, I think it's 7.35 is a favorable comp. I think, again, because I expected it to be a bit higher, and then it just sort of comes down to there's going to be that arm wrestling match between the Canucks are going to argue there's no way you can be making substantially more than what Hanifin made, whereas Hronek's camp will argue that, and this is where it becomes so interesting with contracts, right? Because from a statistical perspective, right, the stats that drive negotiations, leverage, namely being points, time on ice, Hronek and Hanifin compare very similarly in point totals, in both averaging top pair minutes. Because of that, again, Hronek's camp has strong leverage, but the other side of the coin is Hanifin, I think, is a substantially better all-around defenseman. Like, I think he can actually drive his own top pair, whereas Hronek, I don't have the confidence that he can do that. So the main takeaway is just this is not a comp that hurts you from a Canucks perspective. Whereas if it was a scenario where he was extending with the Flames and it's 8 million or higher, that's where it would have been like, oh boy, that's an unfavorable comparable for the Canucks in setting a floor that's way too high for Hronek.
Mark Stone's never going to play a regular season game ever again. Like, have you looked at Vegas's cap picture? Like, they're gonna do something. They do something every offseason. So we're not gonna spend more than 30 seconds talking about this, because they do something every offseason where nobody sees it coming, and then they get off some money, and then they just keep doing it, and the cycle just keeps repeating. They do have some UFAs this offseason, but like one of those harm is Jonathan Marchessault. Like, they have to get some work done this offseason, and they'll do it. We don't doubt that they'll do it, and it'll be interesting to see what they do. But man, that cap picture for next season is looking pretty crazy.
I'm curious to see if they, given Marchessault's getting up there in age and how strong of a season he's had, if I'm in Vegas' situation, I'm letting him walk, even though he's been such a key piece. Just because, look, if you're a Marchessault, even though he likes it there, unless he's taking a heavy discount, why would you not get the bag, right? And if it comes down to who's going to offer the most money, it's not going to be Vegas. And again, given his age, he's 32 or 33. Does it make sense to potentially give Marchessault a lot of term? Like, that's going to be an interesting decision for Vegas to weigh. And given how cutthroat they've been in the past, I would not be surprised if they lean towards, well, we can't afford to potentially sign a contract that is going to be inefficient.
They have been cutthroat in the past, so we'll see. We'll see what ends up happening in that one. But I wanted to bring it up, especially with Philip Hronek. Okay, I like this. So people are talking about Vancouver media. I think he's joking. I hope he's joking. But Logan Van Dyke, Satyar Shah is the worst Canucks broadcaster. His Play Now BC picks never hit. If we're judging broadcasters based on which picks they have, that makes me the best broadcaster in this damn city, because all my picks were hitting when I used to throw them out there. So I'm just throwing that out there that I'm the best.
Yeah, I somehow don't think people are going to agree with that take.
I don't know. We'll see.
Says the guy who predicted the Oilers to get stomped on by the Golden Knights yesterday, and so definitively was wrap it up. The division's wrapped up.
3 times. I've said it 3 times. But as Grady points out in our private chat here, that World Junior bet at plus 5,000.
That was very good. I'll give you that.
That's right. And yeah, it was because I'm a massive homer, and I was like, oh, you can pick Jonathan Lekarmaki to lead the tournament in scoring? Sure, that sounds cool, and threw that out there. But hey, it hit. It doesn't matter how you get there. All that matters is that you hit. And I did. Speaking of which,
I was going to say, the correlation of how right you are just entirely depends on how successful this franchise is. It's a perfect correlation.
Don't let me down, boys. I was gonna say, speaking of your picks needing to hit, see the latest on Shohei Ohtani's interpreter?
Yes, I did.
Pretty pretty wild. Pretty wild. And I mean, this is something we've talked about on a show about when it first happened. Pretty wild. And as we kind of expected, it was fun to make the jokes about Shohei Ohtani being a degenerate gambler, but like, this is a pretty awful situation that he's in. He's had so much money stolen from him. People are always asking, and like, I'll tie it back to hockey because I've spoken to players who have had interpreters before, and especially younger ones. When they first get here, like, those interpreters have access to everything, like all your banking information, all of your accounts, because all of that's done in English over here, right? So, how are you going to pay rent on time if you don't have any understanding of the English language? Like, you can't read, not only can you not speak the language, but you can't read any of the stuff that you're looking at. You're putting a lot of trust in these people that are representing you, and a lot of people just look at it and see them on camera and be like, oh, they're just there to translate what they're saying. It's like, no, a lot of these in hockey too. Like, I think back to Vasily Podkolzin's translator, right? Like, when Vasily Podkolzin and his wife first got here in his rookie year, we were talking to her and kind of learning that she had a lot of responsibility. Like, she had to manage a lot of things for them, because if you don't know the language, what else are you going to do? So again, that just answers the question that people are always asking about, and not always, but I've seen people asking, like, how could he have that much money? And there's the FBI investigation that's kind of come out today that said that Ipe changed the notifications on Ohtani's bank account so that he wouldn't know about money coming out, which is,
that's crazy.
Dude's a massive slime ball, unfortunately.
I hope Logan Van Dyke isn't taking gambling advice from eBay. Did you see the wins and losses? Like, how much he lost? Oh, jeez, man. Like
40 million plus in losses. Oh. But hey, he bet like 160 and he won 120. There's a lot of my group chat. This is a joke. I need to preface this by saying a joke. A bunch of my friends were saying, man, he should have just kept playing. He was about to win big. He was about to hit it big.
That's what I keep telling myself one day too. I got this one. This is the one that's going to put me up in the green.
One. Yeah. This is the one. No, not quite. Not quite. All right.
Know your limit. Play within it, kids.
That's right. Anything else that you guys wanted to get to before we close it out here?
No, I'm good.
Okay. Homework for everybody. Closing this out, because we talked about Tobias Bjornfot yesterday. Find the most obscure NHL awards vote that you can, and it can't be Bjornfot. It can't be, but I'm curious if it is. Yeah. I'm curious if it's up there. So again, if you missed yesterday's show, we talked about our ballots. My rookie year of voting on the NHL awards, I had Tobias Bjornfot at number 3 on my Lady Bing ballot, and I'm the only person that's ever voted for Tobias Bjornfot for any award ever in the NHL. So we'll see.
Those are all available on the Professional Hockey Writers website, and you can sort through all those Google Drives. Better have your magnifying glass, because they are very small.
Yeah, and Hockey Reference, you'll see where you guys finished. 51st place for Tobias Bjornfot in the Lady Bing award. But we'll close it out there for my co-host Harmon Dial and our technical producer Grady Sass. My name is Dave Bugelli. Thank you so much for listening to another episode of the Canucks Conversation. Canucks Conversation with Harmon and Quads, brought to you by the Toyota BZ4X. The BZ4X's fresh look is just an added bonus to its range, since you can drive up to 406 kilometers on a single charge. That's enough to get you from Kitsilano to Whistler or Kamloops to Kelowna and back, and still be home in time for the game. Now that's what we'd call electric. The best part, by choosing electric, you can get up to $11,000 in rebates and incentives. The BZ4X are in stock and selling quickly, so make sure to visit shoptoyota.ca or your local Pacific Toyota dealer to get your hands on one. Canucks Conversation is live Monday through Friday, every weekday at 2 p.m. over on the Canucks Army YouTube channel. Make sure you like, subscribe, and interact in the YouTube live chat every day with us, folks.